Traders, this is Christian from Choppy OPEX Trade Group, and this is your end of day as well as end of week market recap for August 15th, Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. And we are now through half the month of August. Some interesting moves, I would say, this month, and probably better than most feared so far for August. No jinx there, knock on wood. Risk disclaimer in front of you. Everything that we're going through in this video, of course, is for information purposes only. But I would say, just to kind of sum up a little bit of today and a little bit of this week, is that some more rotation in this market. You could see some of these areas that outperformed today are not some of the market leaders for the year. For example, biotech had a real good week today. Was tacked on another 1.25% today. Solar names were up close to 9%. The big story there was that more confirmation about or tax credits and more clarity about them, and perhaps not as bad as some feared in the solar group. Really got that group going today midday. Those things took off, really sharp move. So that's what I would say for a little bit of today. And for this week, a theme was just rotation under the hood, where you saw some different areas of the market perform. And then I would also say, and maybe this had to do a little bit with what we had with economics this week, but just not overall like consistency for the overall market, where it looked like a couple areas were going to break higher, and then they took a step back, and then maybe a couple areas looked like they were going to break down, and they very next day reversed higher. So a very kind of choppy market that we dealt with this week. I'm going to go right to the performance here for the week. I always like to go over this first, just so that you could see, the main column here that I like to pay attention to, besides the overall performance, is just basically what rallied the most from the open. And you could see that, of course, the solar group was there. Look at semis, finished down 2% today. They kind of started down 2% today, and didn't really do much with that. Applied materials was the culprit there with weak guidance, and we've heard that from a couple of these semi names, that they provided weak guidance for going forward. And perhaps that, I think, what I listened to part of the earnings call last night with Applied Materials, because I just wanted to hear why their guidance was so weak. But perhaps just, a pull forward of revenues from the current quarter, getting ahead of some of those tariffs, which was kind of why they beat earnings but are guiding lower. If you're pulling forward business, you're going to have a good quarter, but or possibly beat the current quarter, but you're taking away business from the following quarter. That's kind of what I gathered. They had mentioned also something about one of their customers that kind of hinted around China, but maybe it wasn't China. But maybe somebody else, in Asia that's is showing weak demand. So I thought that was very interesting, and the semis did not really come back from that. The financials were down today. The banks were down 1.7%. They had a really good week today, but they were not. They were not strong today. In fact, they were one of the weakest groups. Okay, let me get to the performance for. I'm just going to switch screens here. So stop screen sharing, and I'm going to reshare the screen. All right. So I kind of mentioned that choppy markets, and some of the more unpopular areas of the market in terms of performance this year did really well. I mentioned biotech earlier. Biotech was up 6% for the week. Healthcare was up 4.6% today. Now, part of that definitely was today with the announcement that several big investors took stakes in United Healthcare, even though that was, going back over 45 days ago. Remember, those 13Fs are old. The cutoff for them, I believe, is June 30th. So you're learning really about past. You're looking in the mirror, in the rearview mirror, about what happened. Regardless, some of these stocks are so beaten up that they took it as positive news and rallied. But yeah, that's a big week for biotech, up 6%. The builders had a big week, but that was earlier in the week after the CPI data. I mentioned solar, clean energy also up there. Transports had a big week, up 3.6%. Communications, remember, communications is basically Google, Meta, and Netflix. Netflix had a big week this week. Retail was up 3.5%. I mentioned those banks, even though that they were down a decent clip today, still for the week up 3.4%, and consumer discretionary was up 2.4% as well, with Amazon having a good week. What didn't perform well? Some of the better areas of this year. So taking a breather, uranium stocks were down 2.4%. Aerospace and defense down about 1% for the week. Industrials also finished lower. Again, that's mainly your aerospace and defense. And tech did not participate this week. Tech actually finished lower this week. Let's go to the top line here because I didn't even go over that, and I just want to make sure I'm going to zoom in here just so that you could see this a bit. But SPY finished up 1% for the week. Diamonds finished up 1.7%. Again, big help there with United Healthcare. Small caps outperformed. They were up 3.1%. They had a big day off of the CPI numbers. Qs eked out a gain, but underperformed the other indices. It's really tough to complain about the Qs. Positive for the week, but lagging some of the other areas. Hence, I mentioned that tech was actually down for the week. Again, very different. You gotta have to remember that tech used to cover what used to be an XLK with some of the companies that are now an XLC, which drove the bus there. So once they split that, you don't have Google, you don't have Netflix, and you don't have Meta anymore, which all used to belong to tech, and now in communications, and that did pretty well for the week. EEM, both major areas of international did well this week. EEM was up 1%. EFA was up 2%. A lot of, if you go down to this international, you've got Spain, which was up 3.6%. I also see Austria, Japan had a good week. Right, all of that goes into the EFA ETF. Right, Japan and Europe. TLT was down. Gold was down this week, and Bitcoin managed to put in a small gain for the week, up a 0.5%, even though Ethereum and some of the other cryptos did very well. Value actually outperformed this week, up 1.3 versus growth. Again, both were positive for the week, but there you go. Let's go ahead and let's look at some charts really quickly to kind of wrap this week up here. I'm going to bring up. I'm going to, of course, start with the big guy. I'm going to start with SPY, and I'm going to show you how this kind of ended for the week. So again, I'm going to stop sharing here, stop sharing, reshare. All right, there you go. So SPY grinding higher all week long. Again, just basically into this 5-period moving average. So a little bit of stall here. I also noted earlier in the week on Wednesday that we got a little bit extended, not crazy extended, but a little. All right, sorry for the pause there. Just had to pause the video because I am dog sitting this week, and I knew he was going to start barking at something. So, in any event, I muted for that reason. But I also want to just call your attention here to, even though price is still above the 5-period moving average, a little bit of a crack here in SPY. I tend to look at the 5-period moving average. Note that we spent the whole week above the value area. We didn't even come close to the value area for the week. We started above. Had some good performance in the first half of this week, but then kind of just flatlined a bit. And you could see a little bit of a break in trend here. So that'll be something to watch. Also, note the value area for next week is in this light gray. So most likely the level that I'm going to be watching is around 641 in terms of support for SPY. Now, when I bring up Qs, I mentioned Qs had a little bit of underperformance for the week. Notice I drew a little bit of a channel in there too. And you could also look at the 5-period moving average, but a little bit of a break of this channel. And again, this is not major stuff, right? This is kind of splitting hairs a little bit, but just note that it's less something changes, right? You've had a little bit of a channel break here in the Qs, right? We've been up since right after the first day of August, right? Since good point to kind of mention this now because we are at the half point of August. But first day of August was that big dip day where things went down pretty decently, right? Well, Thursday really we had the reversal. the last trading day of the month of July. And then we were down decently for the first trading day. And then since then, we've been in this channel back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, check back to it, and actually slid below this channel. So a little bit of a change here. That's what I'll be watching next week. Also, you could just the same exercise here with the bottom of value area for the week, 576. So, those who have been saying, "Oh, this market only goes up," and that type of thing, you might have a little bit of a chance to short next week if this breaks below call it 576, right? And here's IWM. Um, let's go to the daily. Still check back to the 5-day moving average after this big move up earlier in the week, right? Tuesday, the day of the CPI report, right? It's Friday, Thursday, one, yeah, and then follow through, and then kind of stalled a little bit here into the 5-day moving average. So similarly, so we are above the value area for August, but I would watch 227.80, and in the 1 hour chart here, note that we kind of checked back to this and I checked back to this yesterday and rallied, but today we kind of broke through this a bit. So that's what this looks like. Your support will be most likely down here, 223.37, and all three of these look like they're going to open up. If they open up right where they closed Sunday night, then we'll be in value for all three for the week. Again, I tend to look at this 1 hour chart for shorter term moves, and because we get a value area for the week, which is based on all of this week's activity. So that's why that's important. A couple things for today that, of course, the stock of the day was UNH. It did take out a couple of VPOCs up here. It did not take out this one up here. Just looking at the daily chart, you know, by the way, like, so if you bought the dip, like on the very lows, you got rewarded. If you bought the dip, remember those 13 Fs were cut off right here. So all those big investors that bought the dip in here are essentially flat. Right. So, a great day if you manage to think that the 13 Fs and Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway took a stake. You did pretty well with that. But overall, this is still going to be a challenge, I think. And the level to watch here, I would be watching 314.50 with this. I also wanted to go through what one of the other big movers was this week, which is biotech. Has biotech turned the corner here? This is tough to say. I would be watching next week 90.31, right? That's the bottom of the value area for the year. So you're basically just rallying back and taking back all this underperformance. So a lot of reversion to the mean type stuff worked really well this week. Some of the leaders of this market, and I've been going through Hood now for a while, but it is a name that I've been positioning in, and I bought the dip again on this red day. I managed to take some profits off today in Robinhood. And we'll see if this can return. It's back above the 5-day moving average. Again, I didn't take the whole position off. I just took some of what I added on Wednesday, but very strong here. I'm just going to go through a couple other names too. Palantir. I was tempted to buy the dip here, but I actually kind of want to buy this down to the 20-day moving average. So I kind of held off today. Some of these names don't give you a lot of that long of dips, but I just think there's this meeting going on with Trump and Putin, and if they come away with a positive result, I would think your defense stocks will go down a little bit. And Palantir is AI and in that group. And again, that might be a short term. So I would like a little bit more of a dip, and I would be a buyer into that. That's Palantir. Another name too. We went over this in the trading room earlier that a lot of these power generation names look tired, as well as the uranium names look tired. For now, GEV is holding the top of the value area. That's the best in breed. So again, I did not go on the offensive here in any any of these names today on a Friday, but these will just be names I'm watching next week. I also liked what AppLovin did today too. This is another name that I'm watching, right, for a move. Notice it just barely got above the value area for the week. A few other names that I was going to talk about, just the solar, how big the solar move was. Sunrun, took out this upside VPOC. So that's, notice that price likes to go right back to where there was a lot of volume previously. So if you're looking for follow through, I would watch this level here right around 14. First Solar was another name too that I think rallied up to this VPOC up here and stalled for now. SCTG, which was a name I was trading a couple weeks ago, that kind of stalled a little bit too at those previous highs. So all in all, big day for that group, but not sure if we're going to get much more from that. There's a couple other names that I wanted to mention here. Net had a nice turn today. I did get long this name. I like the risk to reward down into the 50-day moving average, as well as to the top of the value area for the month. So I did buy the dip in this one today on today's turn. One other name that I got long just yesterday. I like the inside day yesterday. eBay, very strong. I decided to take this one off for now and just regroup for and be ready for next week. So I will leave it there, guys. Ultimately, I think that some of the leadership of the market looked a bit tired this week and came down, past leadership, or I should say leadership of this year. So could there be more rotation on the tape? It's possible. That's something that I'll be reviewing in the weekend video for members on Sunday. Make sure that you sign up. If you're not a member of Tribeca Trade Group, great chance for you to check it out. You can go to the you could put in the coupon code TTG new for new members, and you can get 50% off your first month. You can kind of see what we do. Here's what I tend to, I'll just kind of bring up this last screen for you, just so a sense of what you're getting here. Let me stop screen sharing, and I'm going to show you this week's watch list. So what I start is I go through all the names from this week's watch list. I kind of create names that are favorites of mine. TMDX was one that I did not take this week. That was one of my favorite names. Onto Semi was one of my favorite names. That did well as well. A couple names in here I took, which I actually took this name off already. VRT. I didn't like how it was acting. I did take Meta this week. So I'll review all these names, and I'll filter. I probably, out of all those names, I'll probably keep about 5 to 6, and then I'll look and I'll go through new charts, and that will all be put in the Slack trading room for you. We have a charts channel about each one of those, and we'll go from there. And here's a sector screen that I use just for momentum. You could see which ones now have strength. It's financials, healthcare, consumer discretionary, communications, materials, home builders, biotech, retail. Right? These are how I'm defining this is just all above their short-term moving averages, the 50, the 20, and the 5-day moving average. Gold miners should also be highlighted here too. It's amazing how the gold miners can continue to go up, even though gold is not going up. Mentioned banks in the transport. So quite a flip in terms of that short-term momentum and what groups have momentum. Some have stayed, but others have kind of flipped a little bit. All right, guys, that is it for the end of week recap. Have a wonderful weekend, and also get some time away from the screens and enjoy your summer.